A Light Within Darkness, Chapter 1, Fan Fiction by Azazyel. When I was dropped into the Hive world Baruis with only a simple, post-it note on the ground saying where I was and realizing that I was in the Warhammer 40k universe, I honestly considered killing myself, as life in this universe was fraught with naught but suffering and horrific examples of casual cruelty. Thankfully I had the equivalent of spawn safety, as I had been dropped into this universe within a literal vault of some kind, or I guess, having large thick metal doors to block out a gene stealer or the smaller bio forms of tyrannids is just a common thing for within a Hive city. But it was only as I was checking my leather jacket pockets to see if I had a fold-out knife to hopefully ice-guy myself to literally any universe other than this one that I grabbed and pulled out what looked to be a glowing crystal orb. Is this supposed to be my cheat or something? I muttered as the orb of light gently broke out of my grasp and flew around me momentarily before, with a start, it shot itself into my forehead. I was awash with an endless deluge of knowledge as the orb seemingly shattered within my body and reformed my plebeian vanilla earth body into a form with far greater potential, while also granting me an entire library of knowledge. And what great knowledge it was! I was given the complete knowledge of an entire path of cultivation. From simple mortal cultivation to celestial cultivation, in which you could grasp the very heavens and bend them to your will. But rather than some omnipotent main cultivation art that would allow me to ascend to the heavens, I was given only a single main cultivation art. Heavenly demon swallowing art. I pondered as I perused the cultivation art within my mind. In its essence, it allowed the practitioner to absorb toxic and malignant energies countless times easier than absorbing natural energies, at the expense of almost crippling yourself at absorbing purely helpful energies at any decent rate. I then realized why I was given this art. In the Warhammer 40k universe, the entire galaxy it takes part in is shrouded in the veil of the warp/the immaterium, a reverse of the real world that was inhabited by endless demons and 4 demon gods of immeasurable might that could sunder planets with ease. Point was that the universe itself was filled with warp energies that bled into the galaxy at large, that regularly warped people into monstrous abominations if they didn't just make their eyeballs explode within their own sockets at the mind-melting images and insanity they may peer into. Not only did I have my primary cultivation art, but my mind also contained almost endless techniques, spells, and, more importantly, auxiliary cultivation arts that would strengthen myself without having to purify myself after absorbing the chaotic energies of the warp. So do I just start cultivating now? I wondered as I stared at the door and then the post-it note that I still left on the ground as I dropped it in my panic. Deciding to stick the note into my pocket, I picked it up and decided to check its backside just in case, and I froze as I noticed the writing on the backside of the note. BTW. Baruis is a planet just east on the galactic map of Krieg, so enjoy the orcs and tyrannids inevitably arriving to. The note read, and even as I began blubbering at the realization that I was on a planet sandwiched between the endless force of the orcs and tyrannids, I couldn't help but giggle at the realization that even a ROB random omnipotent being, having the inconvenience of running out of space to write on post-it notes. Realizing the potential danger of this world and seeing one of the walls of the room stocked with food, water, and even a toilet with a pipe heading straight down a mystery pipe of darkness, I realized whoever sent me here and gave me these cultivation arts obviously wanted me to stay here for a length of time, so I don't die to the first gutter trash I run into outside this small vault. Well, in that case I suppose the first order of business is to refine a set of Kasaya blood beads in order to refine my mind and body, I muttered as I went about the painful task of performing a Buddhist ritual in which I stabbed my thumbs, and by reciting a mantra, dark black blood would be pulled from my body and would pool within a bowl I set aside. Buddhist cultivation arts would be extremely useful in keeping my mind clear of any mental pollution that may slip past my main cultivation art. The black practically blood was pieces of my body's negative karma, and once I folded my hands over the bowl with my bleeding thumbs pressing into my folded fingers, I could feel the blood running down my digits slowly stopping until with a loud clinking noise 2 tiny pebbles of red crystal fell into the dark blood in the bowl. I moved my no longer bleeding hands aside as I tiredly watched those 2 blood crystals absorb and multiply within my blood, slowly creating more crystals and eventually a string-like veins connecting the blood beads. While that was working, I set my cleared mind to follow the heavenly demon swallowing art, slowly and extremely carefully dangled out a tiny portion of my consciousness outside my body, and once I felt something almost nibbling on that tiny portion of my consciousness, I violently yanked it back, pulling in the essence of the warp that was attempting to assimilate my wandering mind into its realm. With that wisp of the warp as I was able to open my extremely metaphorical third eye and begin to slowly absorb the ambient warp energies present. This is slow as hell. I cursed after what felt like 10 minutes of slowly guiding the chaotic energies across my body until the energies broke down and assimilated into my body and began elevating into a greater form. Reviewing my cultivation knowledge, the style I was operating within had a total of 9 mortal realms and 7 divine realms, though I knew the general knowledge of the mortal realms. I was very quickly enlightened that unless I went to a place filled with negative energies or practiced some auxiliary cultivation techniques to gather the warp energy more efficiently than myself just mentally throwing my consciousness out into the immaterial world and absorbing the ambient energies I was going to hit a soft cap in how fast I could cultivate. Basically, with the first wisp I absorbed I had automatically stepped into the first level of the elementary realm with each of the mortal realms having 9 levels within each realm. I realized that with this world not having heavenly herbs or whatnot that I would need to absorb energy in some unorthodox manners. I looked into the bowl and smiled as I saw the cassia blood beads had already absorbed all my blood, so I wrapped light red bloody tone crystals bound with what looked to be blood veins across my wrist and grimaced as they seemingly pierced my skin, and I felt the beads form a symbiotic bond with myself. Now typically the blood cassia beads were a devilish bodhisattva's technique that you would form out of your own blood at the beginning of your cultivation and would then use them as your primary weapon and defensive tool as they grew with the strength of your own body and could even be further strengthened by soaking them in the blood of enemies. In Warhammer 40k, blood is one of the cheapest resources, with how people's lives were worth almost nothing here in this Hive city. I mentally commanded the cassia beads, and with red flash, they lashed out with a swing of my arm, and with a loud crash, the barbed whip smashed against a metal crate and shaved off chunks of the metal as the beads retreated back around my wrist. I looked over to my food storage and realized I had probably a week's worth of food and even less water if I rationed it out to 3 small meals a day, so I sighed and sat down with my knees crossed as went over my knowledge of techniques of auxiliary cultivation arts that could enhance my body so I wouldn't die to some random errant bullet being shot out of a homemade pipe rifle or being mauled by some mutant. I guess it would be best to start out as simple as possible, I muttered as I realized with my meager food storage, I didn't have a solid month to build a strong foundation with a stronger technique like the 9 Yang Sun's true body technique. Instead, I was going to have to use a simple strengthening technique that will lay a foundation for a stronger technique once I get my feet underneath myself here in this Hive city. Diamond body is a go, I suppose. I chuckled as I began practicing the barest bone technique in my repertory, and even half an hour later I could feel my muscles and skin had seemingly tightened up and I realized I had formally laid a foundation in the technique as my skin and muscles had taken on the strength and durability of unrefined iron. 3 days later, I had almost run out of food as I realized the hard way that strengthening your body beyond mortal limits without strengthening your spiritual core would heighten your hunger, and thus, I had little choice but to set out and see what this cursed world had in store for myself. Finally opening the vault door to my not-so-humble abode after a minor struggle to figure out its method I comically poked my head in out of the door and furtively looked back and forth the dimly lit tunnel that went both left and right before I obviously chose the right way in heading down right from my door. Okay, Jake, just go down the dark, eerie hallways, find a way to get food and water, then flee back to your hole where you can cultivate immortality in peace and quiet. Totally easy quest. I said to psyche myself up.